All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. And welcome to this online meetup. I am Max, but today we have a superstar of speaker, AJ, and he'll introduce himself in just a few seconds. The topic today is building identity automation with no-code Okta Workflows and OpenAI. And just a few housekeeping items. So this event is being recorded and the replay will be available right at the same page once we end the session. The video will also be uploaded to YouTube and you'll get a message tomorrow with a link to YouTube. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section. You can also post them in chat and then we'll get to the questions at the end. Follow our Crowdcast channel. So you can follow the channel and then you'll be notified when we go live. And so you don't even have to register for events. You'll be notified, hey, Okta Workflows went live and you can join. And then register for any upcoming events. That's also an option. That we do have upcoming events on the schedule. And you can also let us know what future events you would like to see. And that's it from me, AJ. Take it from here.
Okay, thank you very much, Max, and hello, everyone. So what we're going to do today is look at a practical use case of using identity automation using Okta Workflows, a no-code platform, and OpenAI. Now, there's a very powerful design pattern that we implement commonly with Okta Workflows. This is a time-based pattern. And a key aspect of the time-based pattern is using Okta Workflows tables. I will make the assumption that you're familiar with some of the basics of Okta Workflows. Let me describe to you how we implement a time-based pattern. The key tracker table stores, different attributes, but we have a date to perform the operation column, which is of the date type. And that date is in UTC. So we have a flow that creates an entry in this tracker table. And then we have a schedule process that searches for rows that satisfy the condition date to perform this operation is less than or equal to now. And all of this is in UTC. And then the helper flows process the records. So let's quickly look at what that looks like. I have a tracker table, and you notice that this when to perform column is of type date. I'm going to generate some test data. The test data that I create is I use the date function now, and then I subtract 44 months to land me in the June 2020 timeframe. I'll tell you the significance of that in a moment. So I create a row with before, and then I have another row in that tracker table with 14 days out. The significance of that date will be apparent as we go along. So let me go ahead and run. So it creates two entries in the tracker table. There's a before, June 2020, and an after, Feb 29 of this year. Now I'm going to run a schedule flow, and this is where we are searching for rows in that tracker table when to perform is less than or equal to date. So if I'm looking at this correctly, we're at about 10 o'clock here in San Francisco. And this time is in UTC format. It searches for the rows and returns one row, the before. Right? So that is the one that has passed. So this is an example of how we implement time-based identity operations in Okta Workflows. So let's look at this complex identity use case. We have a geographically distributed company with personnel in remote cities and expanding. You can think about this as a large company, uh, supporting remote work, or a large company with many retail stores and frontline workers around the globe. What they need is time zone aware activation, deactivation, which are essentially identity operations. So for the purpose of today, we will look at an operation where we are deactivating the employee at 5 p.m. local time. This company has multiple sources of workforce information coming from CSVs and different HR systems. The problem statement is that we have the inputs of city, country, and the last day. The output is a deactivated employee at 5 p.m. local time. The challenge is that HR systems typically don't support time zone aware activation. And the only HR system that I am aware of that supports time zone aware deactivation is Workday. So what do we do when we have a CSV, perhaps of contractors coming in to Okta? To solve this problem is actually very difficult, even with code. So let's think about that. We would need code to convert local time to UTC. The customer has no desire for code to be developed, tested, hosted, maintained.
AJ, I'm
Yes,
sorry. Could you maybe make the font just a little bit bigger? It might help some folks. I'm seeing someone, it's a little bit blurry for some folks. Yeah.
okay.
Oh, perfect. Maybe this is better. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, there's complex math like leap years. There is also lookups. So there's an ever expanding list of cities and countries. We have to monitor changing city names, keeping old and new names. We have to track daylight savings time information, monitor changing rules about daylight savings time. So this becomes a pretty complex problem to solve. What if we have one API that can do it all? And that's where we look at the value that OpenAI provides. So the significance of the date June 2020 is when they made their announcement for OpenAI API. And it is a general purpose text in, text out interface. It is not designed for just one use case, right? So it's a general purpose text in, text out interface. Now, if I look at this blog, you can see that we can actually see the original announcement. You can sign up. And in fact, Max, I don't know if you know this, but OpenAI actually uses Okta's customer identity cloud, Auth0, for sign up and sign in.
Oh, that's awesome. You know what? I think I've seen it I've read it somewhere, but no, this is cool.
Yeah, but that's a story for another day. But coming back, the first step in Okta Workflows is to create an OpenAI connection. So for that, you will need your API key and you will need your organization that you can get from the OpenAI console. We have an OpenAI connector with Okta Workflows. What we have done here is we are asking OpenAI to help us with that conversion to UTC. The prompt itself takes a little bit of trial and error. And there are elements of prompt design in this prompt as you see it here. It has context and there's a tone. We want a very deterministic response. We are setting a format that we want the response in, and we're also providing an example. We call the chat completion API of OpenAI, and we get back the fact that if you look at 5 p.m. in this town of Utqiagvik. It's on the northern slopes in Alaska within the Arctic Circle. The date is 2/28/2024. 5 p.m. over there maps to 2 a.m. UTC time, but because it is a leap year, it's the 29th of February. For those of you who have been tracking name changes, this is the new name where you may have known it as Barrows in Alaska. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and build this out? So in Okta Workflows, it's a no-code environment. We drag and drop fields from one card to another. You can think about it very simply as when this happens, let me take some actions, right? So in this case, I'm going to use the trigger Okta profile update. The first action that I'm going to do is I'm going to read the user because I want that additional information of city, state, country, and the last name. Actually, by the way, you can mute because I hear some typing.
That's probably me. I'm sorry. I'm just replying to some questions. I'll mute myself.
Thank you. Okay, so here we have the Okta user whose profile was updated. We drag and drop that onto the read user card. We are now getting the city, state, country, and the last name. The next aspect that we want to do is actually compose that prompt. We obviously want it to be dynamic. So let's go ahead and drag and drop the fields onto this text compose card. So we have the city, the state, country. Let me pretty this up a little bit. Okay, so it's 5 p.m. in city, state, country on a particular date. Let's go ahead and convert that time to UTC and respond with accurate full date time in ISO date form using the UTC notation, and we have an example. So now we have to create the payload for the chat completion API. Let me save my work as I go along. Okay, I can turn it on for now as well while I build the flow up. So my next step is to actually construct the object. So let's look at what goes in. There's a role and there's content. And that's where our prompt goes. Right? So we've done role and content. The next piece of it is we need to make it a list. So we take our item, we put it in here, and we now have a list. This is a list of objects. Now let's go ahead and look at our OpenAI connection. I will use the ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, right? This is the messages is a list of objects, and I have a list of objects that I've created. For this use case, I want a very deterministic response. So I will set the temperature to 0, and I will set the max tokens to 512, even though that's well above the threshold that I really need. The default number of responses is 1, so I don't really need that. I will go ahead and uncheck the fields that I don't need. So I don't need a stop, I don't need penalty. Okay, got it. So now that I actually have called the chat completion API, I have to process the response. So it comes back with choices, message, content. So first I want, because it's responding with potentially more number of messages, right? It's an array. So I need to get the first item in that list. So going down over here, this is choices. It's a list of objects. This is a list of objects as well. So I go ahead and get the first item. In that first item, right, I need message.content. So at this point, I'm ready to create my entry in a tracker table. So let me go ahead and create that tracker table. I'll have username as a text field. And this is the important part of setting the field type to date. Okay, so what I will do is I'll go ahead and add in a table operation of creating that entry. There are two fields. So there's the username. So let me drag and drop that alternate ID and the message.content. So let me review that. So we have the Okta user profile update. We read the user, we get additional information about the user, we compose our prompt, we construct the format of the message that the chat completion API needs. We call the chat completion API of OpenAI, get the first item, extract out the information that we need from the response, and we create a row in the tracker table. Great. The next flow is to actually process those records. So let me go ahead and run a schedule process. We can run it every 5 minutes, but I will just go with the default. And then what I want to do is use a datetime function to get the current date. The next aspect is to actually search for rows within that tracker table. So in the where expression, let's just say date perform operation less than or equal to date, right? So the next thing we do is we get a list of the rows back from searching those rows, and we want to process them. So we will go list, and we'll say, for each of these items, we'll go ahead and process it. So we need to have a helper flow that operates on each record. So I'm going to create a new flow. The triggering event for this is a helper flow. There'll be two inputs, the username and the row ID. So over here, the first thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and deactivate the user. Right? And then when we're done, we can clear out that row from the table. So coming back to this flow, let me go ahead and choose that helper flow that I just created. Pass in the username and pass in the row ID. Okay. So we have deactivate users on schedule and process each user. I've built this live with just a few minutes with all of you watching. So let's go ahead and give it a try and see how it works end to end. So let me make sure I've turned on this flow and saving data so I can show you the payload as it goes through. So I have a remote contractor here that I've set up and happens to live in that remote city in Alaska. It is actually one of the largest cities on the northern slopes. And we will update this contractor's last day, pull that last day into this year. So Okta records an event in the syslog of a user profile update event. If I come over to Workflows and refresh my screen, you can see that we had an execution of this workflow. So let's look at the data as it went through the flow. So we have this Okta user profile update event. It's those fields that you see in syslog, but nicely parsed out for your convenience, so that we can drag and drop those fields from one card to the next. You can see we have read this user. We have located where this user is, formulated our prompt, constructed the object, called the OpenAI chat completion API. We get back a response. We have processed the choices. So we extracted out the first item, and you can see it actually has February 29th, 2 a.m. in UTC. And if you do that math, you'll find that that's correct. And it makes an entry in a tracker table. So if I look at my tracker table, you can see that we've captured the username and the date to perform this operation in UTC. Now let's go ahead and change this entry. I don't expect you to be hanging on this call till the 29th to see this execute. So let me go ahead and just speed time up with my magic wand. And so it's, let's say, February 10th. Come back to this and execute the scheduled flow on demand. So it searches the rows for events that have passed, that have to be processed. And it sees that it has to deactivate this particular contractor. It deactivates the user and deletes the row. So if I come back to my contractor here, you can see that the remote contractor has been deactivated. This is one practical use case of using Okta Workflows and OpenAI to automate your identity processes. Other examples are detecting malicious activity with logins from a distance greater than expected designated location. So think about what I like to call as the traveling executives use case, right? They travel to different places. You want to make sure that you're opening up access when they're on travel to a particular country, but you can get even more fine-grained control and specify a radius. We could add context to access requests to assist approvers in a governance scenario. The value to customers of these scenarios with Okta Workflows and OpenAI is to enhance security, reduce manual tasks, improve productivity, and thereby improve the ability for a customer to gain a competitive differentiator. We have some additional references. My colleague Mick Johnson has authored a blog that's posted on using Okta Workflows and OpenAI. And we also have the documentation, of course, for the OpenAI connector. But we're really, really excited to see the use cases that you implement with Okta Workflows and OpenAI. Thank you, Max. Hope this was helpful. We will go ahead and take any questions that.
Yeah, this was great, AJ. Thank you. So I'm going to post a link for the blog that Mick published. But so one question, so some folks join a little bit later, but one question, if maybe you can summarize just the whole solution. Like what problem do these flows solve? Just a high level overview of what you built.
Right. The way to think about OpenAI is that it's providing a general purpose text in, text out interface, and thereby providing you that ability to get an all-knowing API endpoint. So the use case here is we need to be able to convert a local time to UTC time. And that turns out to be a complicated problem, right? Because there are so many variables. I outlined a few in my presentation, but if you just sort of sit back and think about how you would go ahead and implement that, you would find there's a lot of complexity that you have to address. So OpenAI is providing you an interface where you can ask it a question and get a response that you can use in your identity process as you automate it.
Very cool. Thank you. And then another question was if you could show the first flow you created. They just want to see how it looks. If you could just maybe go back to sharing your screen.
Look at the
first flow. Yeah.
Okay. The flow or the prompt?
It says the flow.
The flow. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just figure out how to share this in a second. So what we've done in 15 minutes is we've built 3 flows. We generate an entry in a tracker table, right? So when you look at the flow chart, all this is graphical, right? We've got user profile update. We read the user to get additional context. We compose our prompt. We construct the message that needs to go to the OpenAI chat completion API. We process the response and we create a row in the tracker table. That's the first flow. The second flow is running on a schedule. It is looking at the tracker table, says, which rows do I need to process? So that's where we are searching the rows in the table based on this expression. And then we are iterating through the rows with the help of a helper flow. And there we process each user, we deactivate the user, and we clear the row in the tracker table. These are the 3 flows that we built in 15 minutes. End-to-end identity use case.
Very cool. Thank you. All right, next question. So I think this is more of, this might be more of a general question, but so question, I haven't used OpenAI's API, but in the past I've received our system are busy, try again later message. So I wonder if this is coming from OpenAI or something on the workflow side. But if a card fails due to something like that, how would it be handled? Will it be handled automatically, retry attempts after X seconds, or will we have to build something to do it? So I think maybe the system busy, that's probably from OpenAI.
Yeah,
the question is
I have
general.
to really the error message to see what exactly is going on. But what I have seen is that it is commonly the case where the payload is not prepared correctly. And that's why I wanted to build this flow out to show how to actually construct the payload. That tends to be more often than not the case why that card fails, because the payload isn't formatted in a way that OpenAI chat completion API is expecting.
Yeah. But just, I guess just in general, right? I mean, any API call could fail, right? It doesn't need to be OpenAI. So, so there is a way to add error handling and into when building a flow. So,
yep, we have, and that's what you would do if you were building this out. You would build out the base case, test that base case out, and add in your exception handling to be able to call another flow that can open a ticket or notify a team to go and take a deeper look at what happened.
Yeah. Actually, I think we have a KB how to handle errors. I'm going to find it, but I'm going to read the question and then I'm going to try and look for it. So the next question is, and AJ, you can probably see the questions, but I'll read them to you anyways. From what they're in the chat. From what I see, this can potentially be used as just-in-time access. Could you summarize what the difference would be in the workflow and how OpenAI can assist on this type of a flow?
Yeah. So the just-in-time access is essentially a user activate identity operation. So what we covered here was a user deactivation scenario. I have heard of the user activation use case. We had a customer that had global events and they were bringing in partners and they needed to be provided access, but only at the start of that particular event. So obviously, it makes no sense for somebody to be up at 2 a.m. in the night just to activate a few users. But that's a scenario of just-in-time access or user activation.
Got it. All right. I'm looking for that KB, but I can't find it. How to handle. Anyhow, I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. There's another question. AJ, again, do you see the question, or you want me to read it for you? It's in the chat from Ross.
Ross. Okay. Reading through the question. Yeah. So I think when we think about different applications and systems from an Okta perspective, our goal is to provide you a safe way to integrate with any technology that you choose. Okta Workflows performs identity automation across applications and systems. In this scenario, we are using OpenAI to help us with time zone conversion, right? So the basic capability of Okta Workflows is that we can design these time-based patterns. But when you want a finer degree of control where you want it to be time zone aware of a particular location, we can use OpenAI for that conversion to UTC. Hope that helps Ross to delineate between what Okta Workflows basic capabilities are and how OpenAI augments those capabilities.
Great. And you know what? I found it, KB. So this is just a general KB on how to handle errors. All right. But I'll also include this in the follow-up message. It will include the link to YouTube, and I'll include this link as well, and other links I shared before. Cool. Well, I don't see any more questions, but folks, if you have any other questions, feel free to put my email in the chat. Feel free to email me those questions, and then I'll get them to AJ, and then we'll get back to you. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, follow our Crowdcast channel, register for forthcoming events. AJ, thank you again for hosting with us. So yeah, AJ has been hosting meetups for some time with us, so thank you.
Yeah, great.
We will definitely have you back.
So I love your events, Max, and happy to be a part of it.
Very cool. All right, folks. Thank you again. And then we'll see you next time. AJ, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.